Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in with us this afternoon. My name is Rachel. I am the Senior Vice President of Clinical Care at Parent Project Muscular Dystrophy. With us today, we have Jody Wolf of Santhera Pharmaceuticals, and she's going to lead a really great conversation today about teen and adult clinical trial participation. And we have a couple of members of our Adult Advisory Committee to join her in that conversation as well. So, Jody, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, we look forward to learning more about you and about the exciting things that Santhera has going on.
Great. Thank you so much, Rachel. My name is Jody Wolf. I'm the head of patient advocacy in the U.S. at Santhera Pharmaceuticals. I just want to thank PPMD for hosting us today. I'm very excited to have with me today our two featured guests who I will let introduce themselves, Colin Werth and LeClair. Colin?
Hi, my name is Colin Werth, and I'm from Farmville, Virginia. I'm 25 years old and was diagnosed with Duchenne when I was 3 years old in 1998. I graduated from community college in May of 2015 and have been working the past 4.5 years as an IT specialist at Letterpress Communications, a small local marketing firm. My main specialty is web design, but I also help with any IT-related tasks. I've been on the PPMD Adult Advisory Committee the past 4 years, helping guide Duchenne policy efforts. In my time on the PAC, I've been on multiple conference panels and have advocated on Capitol Hill.
Great, thanks. Austin, can you introduce yourself for us?
Yep. Hi, my name's LeClair. I currently live in Boston, Massachusetts, and I'm 21 years old. I'm currently going to school for mechanical engineering at Bunker Hill Community College, and I'm co-founder of One Rare. And if anyone wants to help support, we're doing fundraisers, looking for people to be active in helping out with it. So please reach out to me.
Great. Thanks, Austin. So I'll start with just an overview of the webinar today. I'll be providing some information about the industry perspective of conducting trials in teen and adults with Duchenne. I'll talk a little bit about Santhera's Pitaros clinical trial and our learnings from that trial recruitment. And then we'll talk about community perspective, so some of the work that's been done in the Duchenne community to uncover perspectives on teen and adult trial participation. That'll take about 15 minutes, and then we'll spend the majority of the time with Colin and Austin so they can share their trial experiences and views about trials recruiting boys and men who are non-ambulatory. So please type in any questions for me, Colin, and Austin into the chat box. We will have plenty of time for Q&A, we hope, at the end of the webinar. So let me first talk about why this is important to Santhera. We are a Swiss-based company with U.S. headquarters north of Boston. We've been working in Duchenne and respiratory function since 2008. We have 3 completed studies, and the majority of our trial participants were non-ambulatory or no longer able to walk. And by majority, I mean about over 90%-ish. So we are currently conducting one of the largest Duchenne studies in boys and men 10 and older. And it is one of the only trials recruiting non-ambulatory boys and men in the U.S. right now, which we'll talk about a little bit later. We've had to do a lot of work to recruit for this large trial. So we have invested a lot in learning about the barriers to trial participation and how teens and adults make decisions about trial participation. And as part of that, we've committed to sharing our learnings with the community. And we hope that through this, we can build a foundation for future non-ambulatory and also trials in teens and young adults. We have engaged a large section of the Duchenne community, including physicians, teens, and adults with Duchenne, as well as the broader clinical community. And I'm just going to run through some of our learnings right now. I'm going to start by telling you a little bit more about our current trial so you have a sense of the work that we are doing now that have led to these insights. So we are currently recruiting for a second phase 3 clinical trial called the Santhera trial. The objective is to study the efficacy of edevenone compared to placebo in delaying the loss of respiratory function in boys with Duchenne who are using steroids. We are recruiting 266 males with Duchenne, so it's a very large trial. Those participants need to be 10 years of age and older, and they need to be using steroids. We have 64 centers worldwide, the global study, and 20 of those are located in the U.S. It's a 78-week study, so a year and a half, and participants are randomized 1-to-1 to be on edevenone or placebo for a year and a half. The placebo control was a regulatory requirement, and the trial is currently over 90% enrolled, but we're still recruiting. We're still trying to push this over the finish line. Now, to be included in the trial, it can be any mutation, and the boys and men must have a forced vital capacity or breathing capacity between 35 and 80% of predicted value. They can be on any regimen of prednisone or deflazacort, and they must be on steroids for at least 12 months without any dose adjustments except for weight in the last 6 months. Now, there are a couple of groups who cannot be in the trial, and that's those who are already using daytime assistance for ventilation. So no using of a BiPAP during the day. And you cannot be a part of any other ongoing therapeutic trial or any experimental drug within 3 months of starting Santhera's trial. So there's the opportunity to wash out of other things, but you can't be on them at the same time while participating in the trial. So what we've learned trying to recruit 266 boys and men, and I say men because the trial has no upper age limit. Santhera has engaged in many avenues to form a deeper understanding of the challenges of trials in teens and young adults. And we know that stabilization or slowing decline is an important therapeutic goal for teens and adults, and that even small improvements or slowing down decline can be meaningful. We do believe that combination therapies or a cocktail approach is likely to be needed to address different components of the disease progression, especially in teens and adults who are further along in their disease course. There are many ways to think about that. That could be therapies for dystrophin production, fibrosis, mitochondria. It could be for your heart, your lungs, your muscle function. But it is generally agreed on that we want as many tools in the toolbox as possible. So in the fall of 2018, we hit a plateau in our trial recruitment, and we worked with a group called CISCRIPT, the Center for Information and Study on Clinical Research Participation, to understand trial participation in this group. CISCRIPT actually went and interviewed 17 trial sites, and the nurses and the physicians expressed the following views. So this is what the physicians and nurses were saying that you felt. They said that endpoints matter, that maintaining strength is important, and even maybe more important than respiratory and cardiac function. That the narrow eligibility criteria is a barrier to participation, that we are excluding too many boys and men who are willing to participate in trials, that genetically modifying therapies are of greatest interest. So anything that creates dystrophin and fixes the underlying gene defect is of the greatest interest. That teens and young adults adjust to their current health state, so they aren't necessarily aggressively seeking therapies. that regular care is already burdensome without adding trial participation on top of it, and that you all have too many appointments already in some situations, that the physical challenges of traveling are a deterrent, especially with wheelchairs and when you have caregiving needs, and that the trial design is important to minimize the burden to families, and that the reimbursement for travel is not just appreciated, but incredibly important. So this is what 3 physicians, I just pulled some quotes from this study. This is what 3 physicians say about the challenges of teen and adult trial participation. You have that lull of a few years when they're just over it. They just want to enjoy life. They've transitioned into a wheelchair. They've accepted it. Then they don't really start to think about treatment options again until maybe they start to have some respiratory decline or any cardiac decline. Another physician went on to say that there's a level of exhaustion that the families are facing by the time they're a little older, so that their medical complexities are a lot higher than the younger kids. And they often kind of have worked things out to a place where they're in a wheelchair, they know what to do, and they kind of have things settled. And I think just the disruption of it is a barrier. And another physician said, so they'd rather not add the burden of the study in their burdens because Duchenne is already demanding lots of attention for care for the family. So that's just 3 quotes from physicians. So we wanted to hear directly from the families and from the boys and men themselves. So we brought these learnings to the PPMD Adult Advisory Committee in March 2019. Now, this is what this group of guys told us, and we had probably we had a dozen guys there to react to some of this research. And they said that there needs to be more of an emphasis on staying healthy. And why wait to intervene until you're sick? They felt that people could be more healthy with Duchenne. And this was a level of frustration that they expressed. They did feel that upper arm strength is very important and that sometimes they forget about the importance of the heart and lungs. That they are interested in therapies that have multiple benefits on multiple systems. And that no one wants to take more pills if they can help it. 4 hours really seemed to be the limits of travel to a trial site. Overnight travel was difficult for this group of guys. And several of them told me that if the trial site wasn't closed, they would not travel to be a part of a trial. They did feel that trial participation was motivated by potential personal benefit and sense of purpose, but that in the broader scheme, it was a way for them to contribute to something bigger than themselves and helping people down the line. And this was important to them. They also talked about the importance of education about their health, as well as clinical trials. And they felt that some of the apathy about trial participation was a way to protect yourself against unrealistic hopes and disappointment. Now, in April 2017, PPMD held the Clinical Trial Burden Workshop, and the results of this workshop have been published, as you can see on the right-hand side of the screen. And through that, we learned that trial participation is a family affair, that participation in a trial affects the whole family, that the placebo is still problematic in a clinical trial design, and that it is a consideration of families when they're considering trial participation. And that going into the trial, very few families entertain the idea that a trial could fail. So this isn't necessarily top of mind. Now, they rely on the physicians to tell them about the trials. That's their main source of finding out about trials. And it's important for industry to understand the burden of specific tests that you undergo during the trial visit. So these are very long days, and it's important to understand the burden of these specific tests. Communication about trials are challenging, and more attention is needed to how the results and the decisions about trials are relayed to trial participants. We've seen this be a challenge in the community. And, at the beginning of a trial, it can be hard to anticipate what you are getting into. You don't know what you don't know. And at the start of the trial, you don't necessarily know even how long the trial will last. We've seen trials last years beyond maybe what was anticipated by a family. Choosing a trial can be psychologically taxing, and there's a lot of pressure on choosing the right trial and making decisions to participate in trial. And for the whole family, being a part of a trial can be a financial burden with missing work and traveling. Now, there's one more group that I want to tell you about that we engaged to learn more about trial participation in teens and young adults with Duchenne. In December 2019, we met with the certified Duchenne care centers and with the physicians and the clinical trial leads at their centers, and they shared the following information. They felt that many potential trial participants are holding out to see what their options are and what might be coming down the line for trial options in the future. They did feel that as physicians, they would refer you to the closest trial site if they aren't participating in that specific trial, and that's obviously the best practice. They did feel that it might help for people who are interested in trials to talk with other trial participants if they're thinking about being in a trial. And that's actually what gave us the idea to do this webinar today. They felt that trial fatigue might be a factor in non-participation of trials, and that it's hard for some families to entertain the idea of being in another trial after they've already completed one trial. For some, there wasn't enough motivation. It was just all too much. And they also felt that teens and young adults don't want to try something that could make them worse. And that's always a possibility with an investigational drug. And everyone said that advocacy groups play an important role to raise awareness of trial participation opportunities. So that's what we've learned from multiple sources. But there's really no better way to learn about trial participation than those who have been through it. So we will be keeping the conversation vague, and we won't be discussing specific products and trials. And we ask you to do the same when you type in questions. But I want to open the line for Colin and Austin right now. And just thank you both for joining us today. I'd like to start by asking you to tell us a little bit about yourselves in the context of your trial participation. So are you currently in a trial, and for how long? Have you participated in that trial, and is this your first trial, or have you participated before? So Colin, do you want to get us started?
Sure. So I actually started a clinical trial recently. I've been in one for the past 5 months, but and I was also in one when I was younger too, and I've also done a few natural history studies.
And Austin, how about you?
Yeah, so I'm not currently in a trial. The longest trial I've ever been in is the trial was about a year or two, and I have participated in 2 trials before.
Okay, great. Now, how did you decide to participate in the trial? Why was it important to you? Austin?
Yeah, so I learned about the trial I've been in from my mother, because because of her involvement in biotech work. So she's always listening for new trials that I could possibly get into. The first one, my mom suggested I get involved in my first trial because I decided to see if that was something that would help me and other people like me. It was always like joining a trial. A big factor to me is even if it won't help me, will it help other people later down the line? And I got into my second trial because my brother had been involved in the original trial, so I ended up getting into after the original, I got into the next trial of this medication.
And how about you, Colin? How did you decide to participate in a trial, and why was it important to you?
So it had been kind of a difficult decision because kind of waiting, as you had mentioned, to see, because there's so much in the current pipeline that hard to decide if you want to be in one, even though there's not many options for the non-ambulatory. So it wasn't. It's certainly not difficult to find one, but difficult not knowing if something else would pop up in the future. And I would just say that certainly weighing the risks and benefits is definitely an important decision factor, as well as travel, as you mentioned.
So, Colin, it was a difficult decision for you. What kind of pushed you over the edge that you wanted to actually commit to it?
So I'd been waiting for a while, and nothing had really come up. So just decided it was worth it to go ahead.
Okay, thanks. So it was more that there were just limited options, and that and nothing was really opening up. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
What factors were important in making a decision to be in a trial, Austin?
So I felt like my body is deteriorating no matter whether or not I do these trials. So I thought I had every reason to try new things, because I always thought if the trial doesn't help me directly, I could potentially help other people like myself in the future through the research that is done.
Colin, did you want to add anything to that?
I kind of agree with what Austin was saying, and also, as I mentioned, that definitely weighing the risks and benefits. And
okay. So let's move on. How much say did your parents have in your trial participation, Colin?
So when I was younger, my parents decided to put me in the study that I mentioned, but now I make all the decisions for myself, but I definitely include my parents in the discussion.
And were they pretty receptive? Or how did they respond?
Yes, they were very receptive and trusted my decision.
And how about you, Austin?
Yeah, so my mom has always been very supportive of getting me involved in trials, and especially because all the trials that I started in was when I was a child, and my mom really had to be fully participate in it. But so far, though, my mom and I, it's been a 50-50. We've both decided that we wanted me to do it, and so far we haven't had any disagreement about me doing the trial, because my mom understands the importance of me being in them, and so do I.
Now, did you guys have any fears going into a trial?
So I didn't really have many. So I didn't have very many fears because I didn't have very many fears because I knew that my disability was always gonna get worse. And I figured the best way to go about that was going to trial. And, because of how fast the disease progresses, I don't necessarily have time to be scared of it, because the real fear would be if I didn't try to change it. And that's why I've never been scared of going into trials.
And Colin, how about you?
I agree with that. And I had also done a lot of research and thinking about it a lot, my decision, so I knew what to expect. And also the trial I'm in now didn't really have any safety concerns.
Can you talk a little bit more about the kind of research you did, Colin?
Really just knowing more details about how the trial works, and also so just
learning more about the trial and the drug?
Yeah.
Okay. So, Colin, can you tell me a little bit about how often you go to the trial site, how far away it is from you, and how you get there?
So as of now, I have to go back to the trial site every 3 months. It's a 4-hour drive. I usually do that with one of my parents, and then we typically spend the night at the trial location. And also, actually, we have some friends that live the trial location, so we usually visit them to make it a little fun.
Oh, that's cool. So you guys drive there, and you rely on your parents to get you to and from. Austin, can you tell me a little bit about your trial participation in that regard?
Yeah, so I went to my first trial 4 times a year, which was in Columbus, Ohio. And that one was when I lived in Vermont. And the other one I was in Boston. And I went there every week. So Columbus, Ohio was about 12 hours drive by car from where I live. And then the second trial that I was in was really close. It was about a half hour away. So, for the most part though, when we went to Columbus, we would fly there because 12 hours is a lot of time to put aside for travel.
And you went with your mom, right?
Yes, so the first one that I went to, my mom went with me, but the second one that I was in, I had a care assistant that was luckily able to bring me every week.
Great. I mean, did they drive you? Did you use public transport? How did that work?
Yeah, so I had a van, and my personal care assistant would drive me to the trial site every week.
Great. So have either of you ever had problems or challenges in traveling to and from your participation in a trial?
Yeah, so some of the challenges that my family and I faced were, although hotels and plane tickets were reimbursed, we still had to pay for food and gas to get to the airport, which at the time was 2 hours from my house. My mom also had to pay a babysitter to be able to take me to the trial site. And then missing out in school was not a problem because I was homeschooled due to the school's terrible air quality that I went to. And finally, the worst problem that happened was the van that was scheduled to pick us up from the airport didn't show up. But luckily, one of the nurses was on site and able to come pick us up.
Yeah, so I haven't really...
How about you, Colin?
I haven't really had any issues since we don't have to fly for the study, so usually nothing serious, usually just traffic or driving in bad weather, but nothing too bad.
Yeah. Have you ever had trouble with your equipment breaking or anything like this?
Nope.
Austin?
Yeah, I've had a few times that my wheelchair has been damaged, but for the most part, I wasn't really able to deal with it because the way airports work is you have to report the damage and sit there for them to do anything, and if you leave, like, the cost of the damages would not be covered.
So what did you decide to do?
So for the most part, I wasn't really, I think I brought a manual chair. Sometimes I brought a mobility scooter because that would be easier to move around. So I ended up getting a portable wheelchair powered chair because I was sick of my normal chair getting damaged.
That's a good idea. Did you purchase that out of pocket? Do you remember?
Yeah, I think the manual chair we paid out of pocket, or the portable power wheelchair we paid out of pocket, because as you all know, insurance only covers the one wheelchair that you need, and they don't really like to cover costs for other equipment.
Right. Okay. So guys, tell me what a typical day looks like when you go for a trial. Colin?
So my trial visit is a lot like a typical clinic visit. Usually it lasts for half the day. I do some testing and get my vitals. You have to go over how things are going with the trial, and report any side effects you might be having. You have to give a blood and urine sample and then do a few more tests and meet with the doctor who's the trial investigator.
Okay. How about for you, Austin?
Yeah, so a normal day for the first trial involved doing a lot of blood work and being observed for a few hours. Then the second trial, I was involved driving into Boston, getting infusion for about 2 hours, occasional blood work, and work down my homework, and then finally driving home from Boston's notoriously terrible traffic.
Okay. Now, guys, with all the blood work, have you ever had problems with that?
Yeah, so actually I had a lot of trouble with blood work. So when I got in my second trial, and my brother had already gone through it, so we decided to get a port plate because blood is really hard to get, especially because Duchenne causes our veins to be smaller and often move around a lot. So my brother got his first port because one trial visit, they had to try to stick him 12 times. So after that, we decided I was going to get a port and my brother would.
And have you ever had any problems with the port, any infections, anything like that? Or has it been fine?
It's been fine. It's been a lot more helpful. At first, I didn't really like the feel of it, but now I prefer using my port over using my arms to do blood work. Because, blood work, it just doesn't really work for me. I start getting nauseous and, because of all the blood that they have to take.
Yeah. Great. Thanks for sharing that. Colin?
Yeah, I haven't really had any issues. Happened to be stuck 12 times, thankfully. But I think one time it was
okay, great. Good veins, huh?
2 tries, yeah.
Great. So, Colin, I'll just stay with you. How does trial participation influence your daily life for work or school?
So it doesn't really impact my daily life. Actually, since I only have to go back every 3 months.
Do you take the day off work?
Yes. Well, I usually take the day before as well to travel to the trial site.
Okay.
And the only way it influences my daily life is I just have to remember to take the medication and then keep track of everything. Keep track of taking it, writing down when I took it, and if any issues I run into. not much of an impact.
Okay, so you do keep it like a daily diary of when you take the meds and how you're feeling?
Yeah.
Austin, how does child participation influence your daily life for work or school?
So the first trial I was in did not interfere with school at the time because I was being homeschooled, but it did affect my mom's ability to work. And then the second trial did affect school, but my school was very understanding about missing class one day a week and sent me everything I missed, so I was able to work on my schoolwork during the visit with help from my PCA. It also didn't affect my mother's work because I was able to have my PCA bring me to every visit.
That's great. Now, Austin, how did you feel about going to a trial site and seeing a physician that wasn't your usual physician who was managing your care?
Yeah, so both trials I participated in were with my usual physicians at the time, but I've never minded having physicians that aren't my usual ones because I've learned that most doctors don't know much about Duchenne to begin with, so I'm often the expert in the room, and I like being in control, especially when it comes to my medical care.
And how about you, Colin?
It wasn't any issue for me either, and also it seems that most of the locations that do the trial are by physicians that are familiar with Duchenne.
Now, was it hard to schedule or to be in a trial on top of your usual daily or your usual care and your usual appointments with your physicians?
No, that hasn't been a problem for me.
So for me, it actually helped. So for me, it helped out a lot because I was going to the same hospital I normally do my yearly appointments. So lots of times I was able to combine them and do my yearly appointments in tandem with my trial visits for the second trial I was in.
Yeah, that's great. That's really important.
Mm-hmm.
So listen, so Austin, would you encourage other teens and young adults to be in a trial? Why or why not?
Yeah, so I would definitely encourage other teens or adults to participate in trials because it gives you a chance to meet others with similar issues or illnesses, and then it also will give you a better understanding about the medical industry and what you need to do for your own medical care. And who knows, it might spark an interest in the biotech industry and lead to a future career in this field. So it actually did that for me. I'm an engineering student, but I'm working towards running bioreactors. And then lastly, if you don't see any personal benefits, it's still worth it because your data is extremely important to find a cure, and you taking part in the trials will definitely help future generations. And your participation is really the driving force behind furthering this really exciting time that we're facing in the medical industry.
Great. Thank you for that. And Colin?
Yes, I definitely agree with everything that Austin was saying. Yeah, in addition to the trial possibly being of benefit to you, and it can be a benefit to others as well, and possibly help them get the drug at some point.
So what would you want companies to know about trial participation for teens and young adults?
So I would say, yeah, definitely it's so for me, when getting into the trial, I decided it was worth it because there aren't visits that often. So with the visits being every 3 months, that's not a big impact on your life, because I think it's also hard with me living in a kind of rural area in Virginia, having to always drive to get somewhere for a trial. Also, that would be kind of a lot, having for me to travel weekly, because that would be a lot of driving.
Yeah, so it's important for industry when we're designing trials to minimize the burden of visits. It sounds like that's important to you.
Yeah, and travel.
Make it easier. Austin, what do you want companies to know about trial participation?
So I'd like companies to understand that the financial burden is often the biggest issue that families face, and I think families need to stop having to pay financial burden to be able to participate in a trial. And I understand as someone entering the industry that it's really expensive to run a trial, and you need to make a profit. But if you could eliminate the cost for being in a trial that the families have to pay, you would end up seeing a lot of people joining your trials. In turn, like, if you have more numbers and you have more people you collect data on, in turn it would get a drug approved faster, and then putting the money back into the company so they can do more trials and try to do more research.
Okay, great. I think that, most companies will reimburse for trial participation as far as, making the trial, the travel arrangements for you and things like that. But some of the things that you brought up were food, gas, driving to the airport, paying the babysitter, things like that I think are some of the soft costs associated with clinical trial participation that are very important for companies to remember. So, are there any tips that you guys would offer to make trial participation easier for families? If there's a family out there or a young person interested in being a part of a clinical trial, how can they make that easier? Anything you've done? Austin?
Yeah, so I think you need to, I feel like most doctors, when you go to a visit, they don't necessarily know of the trials or be. So I think it's really important that you try to find a way to get that information about trials before the doctors necessarily know about them. That way, when you go into the hospital for your visit, you can say, I heard about this trial. I would like to try to participate in it. Do you think this would be the right fit for me? So I think it's really important to bring that information to your physicians and doctors as well, so they can tell other people and then give you recommendations of whether or not you should join the trial.
Yeah, that's great guidance. Colin, how about you? Any tips that you would offer to make trial participation easier?
So I agree with what Austin said again, and also, as I said, I've done a lot of research into the trial I'm currently in, just to understand it and make sure I knew what the drug did, and I guess just kind of making sure you know it, as well as ask your doctor what they think.
Great.
So basically just know what you're getting into.
Okay, great. Now, is there anything else that you want other young people or their parents to know? Any closing thoughts here? Colin?
Let me think.
Okay, how about you, Austin? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think it's very important that parents and teens or young adults understand that even if they feel like even if it's a trial to just study the history of Duchenne, or any disability, it's really important to realize that even if you're just joining the trial, that's very helpful and it's needed for our community to be able to further advance the technology to make our lives easier and to try to end the disease.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, Austin. As a community, we can work to make trial participation easier, and but always need those willing participants as well to move the field forward and to continue learning. So I would like to open it up right now, the chat box, to any questions that you all have. We have quite a few people on the line. So please, if you have questions for myself or for Colin or Austin about clinical trial participation in teens and young adults, please feel free to type that into the chat box now. We'll continue to monitor that and take a look. We did have one question about using home health care as a way to be more patient-focused in a trial. Now, Austin, have you ever had the experience of having home health care, like the trial come to you?
So actually, the second trial that I was in, I'm actually on the medication, the approved version, currently, and I have home infusions every week. But I had never thought about that it would be a possibility to have a trial come to you. But I think that would be a really good idea because it's easier to have a healthcare person, like an able-bodied person, travel to you than you trying to travel to them. I think it would definitely also be cost-effective. So I think that's actually a good idea to try.
And Colin, have you ever had the experience of using home health as part of a trial?
No, I have not.
Okay. All right. Well, as we wait for any other questions to come in, I do want to just talk about the trials that are currently recruiting non-ambulatory boys. And those are from my company, Santhera, as well as Sarepta. We are recruiting 10 and older with no upper age limit, regardless of mutation right now. Sarepta's trial that includes non-ambulatory boys, teens, and young adults, they have a study for their exon 51 amenable PPMO, and that's for people with Duchenne up to age 21. And I'll go ahead and just offer a summary of our webinar today. As you can tell, pioneering work has been conducted to better understand teen and adult trial participation from your physicians, from PPMD, from the companies working in the space. And PPMD has been a tireless advocate to increase the number of trials available to teens and adults. We're really grateful to be one of the companies working in that space and to be able to share the learnings with you today. Teen and adult trial participation is possible. We've recruited a couple hundred young adults across the world with Duchenne. It is possible. It takes coordination, as you hear from Colin and Austin, how they've been able to make it possible. Current and past trial participants can be a great resource to those interested in trial participation. And I'm sure Colin and Austin would be happy to continue to answer any other questions that you have. And addressing barriers to trial participation could certainly help increase the number of trials available and decrease the recruitment time. So at this point, I just want to thank you for joining us today. Here's my contact information. If you have any questions about our learnings or about Santhera's work, please feel free to email me directly. And at this point, I will turn it back over to Rachel.
Great. Thank you so much, Jody, and thank you guys, all, Austin and Colin. I think that you had some really great insight for all of us that were listening in. I know that I personally learned a lot. So thank you for joining us and for letting us kind of peer into your minds about participation in clinical trials as young adults. So it was just really, really interesting to hear. For those of you listening in, if you're like me, you always come up with questions after the webinar or the phone call is over. So please don't hesitate to reach out to us either directly. I'm available at rachel@parentprojectmd.org or through Jody's contact information on the slide as well. We're happy to field any of those additional questions that you might come up with as you ponder the content later today. So please don't hesitate to reach out to us with any questions. At this time, we'll go ahead and conclude the webinar. This was recorded, so it will be available for you to listen to back again at a later date if you'd like. And thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate everybody taking time out of their day to listen in. So thanks so much, and everybody have a great day.